Welcome to Cooler Conversations, the podcast culmination of cool stories and the coolest people. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. If you're not so new, welcome back. And if I'm welcoming you back, please be sure to leave a review and hit us up on the social media pages and let me know what you think of the show. Today's guest is the head brewmaster of Red Oak Brewery, America's largest lager-only craft brewery based in Whitsett, North Carolina. At Red Oak, they bring slow and old-world simplicity of the Bavarian brewing to North Carolina. This is Chris Buckley. What's up, Chris?
Hey, Tyler. Thanks for having me here today.
This was always at the top of my list to always have this on the podcast. I don't know if because me and you have talked before. You've talked to many people, so I'm sure you have no idea if you remember this at all.
I do recognize you.
Okay, that's good. But Red Oak was my first ever 21 drink, and so it's always had that like soft spot in my heart. And I try to explain that to people, and they're like, "Well, my first one was like Bud Light or all that." So this is a big deal for me.
You were one of the lucky ones, yeah.
What was just to kind of play it off? What was your first?
My first would have been Guinness. My dad, coming from Ireland, always had Guinness in the fridge.
Okay,
so it was definitely a Guinness.
Was it not too dark for you?
No, because if that's the first beer you ever had, that's what you associate beer to be. And Guinness is actually the most widely recognized beer on the planet. When you ask people to describe a beer, and if you gave them some colored pencils, they would draw a pint of Guinness. That was a study that was done several years ago.
That is so crazy. So do you think that's the reason why Americans typically, especially like college students, are so picky? Because their first alcoholic beverage is like a Truly or like a Bud Light?
Yeah, that's right, because then anything with flavor is shocking. It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
You don't know what to do with it, and you don't associate that with beer. You associate the watered-down taste as being a real beer. It's even amber beers. A lot of times people tell me, they don't like Red Oak because they don't drink dark beer, and that always gets me because, that's not a dark beer. But to the person whose first beer was a Bud Light, Red Oak is a dark beer. I get that.
Yeah. So for anyone that wants to know, we are sitting in the Lager House. When did this come out? It was like 3 years ago?
Yeah, so we opened up in December of 2017.
Okay, so it's been quite some time. I remember when it was just the tours in their general brewery, and you guys expanded from there, and then you've got this going on, you've got the beer garden and a new museum. So this is like turning into its own little adventure park.
Absolutely is. Yeah, it's the Red Oak Village.
Village,
yes.
Okay.
And we just, with the art museum, we just named it the Griffith Art Museum after Anne Griffith, longtime employee of Red Oak, did all of our graphics for many, many years.
Awesome.
She's very involved with all the art that has been purchased for the museum, and we honored her just a few weeks ago. Total surprise, unveiling of the temporary sign out front that says the future Griffith Art Museum. So we're very excited to get that up and running.
That's awesome. On a selfish point, are you going to get your own building?
I don't think so. I'm too humble for that too. I wouldn't even want that. Yep.
Okay. So I kind of wanted to take like a step back, because my question, I guess, for you, and I remember you talking about this before, is how do you find yourself as a brewmaster in the largest lager house in America? Like, what did you have to do to get to this point?
Well, a lot of it was just, I guess, luck, as many things are in life. I was born and raised in Germany.
Okay.
Lived there for 25 years. And then I went to a brewing school in Munich to become a certified brewer and maltster. It's a 4-year program. I finished it in 2.5 years.
Okay.
And that's what I learned how to do, was not just Bavarian-style lagers, but Bavarian-style beer. It's a different art of brewing. Mm-hmm. And when I graduated, the brewing industry in Germany is in a decline. It still is. And very few graduates actually had jobs waiting for them.
Wow.
I did have one at the Paul Honor Brewery in Munich. It's one of the 6 breweries left in Munich. But they put me in the cellar. And it's the hardest job in an old brewery, because not only is the beer being chilled, but so are the employees. You're working in sub-zero temperatures all day long, deep in the ground. Their old cellar was several stories underground. So I placed an ad in a American Brewing magazine just out of interest to see if somebody would bite, and I got an offer, Alexandria, Virginia, brand new brewery. All the equipment came out of Bavaria, and so happened to be that it was the same brewing system that Red Oak had purchased in 1990.
Wow.
So that was the first connection, and while I was working in Virginia, I received a phone call from Christian Bose, the original brewmaster at Red Oak, and he had called Germany for a part. They quoted him 2 to 3 weeks. He was dead in the water here. They said, well, maybe Chris might have that part, and I happened to have it on my shelf, so I overnighted it to him, and we never met, but we had a friendship through that. He had helped me out in a pinch a year later where I was looking for a part.
Wow.
And so when Christian left and they were looking for a replacement, Bill Sherrill, who's the owner of Red Oak, he was on the phone with the Wolfgang Roth, who was the equipment manufacturer, and Wolfgang had recommended me, being not too far up the road in Virginia, you might want to give him a call. And at the time, I was looking for a change, and it was a perfect fit because they were making Bavarian-style beers.
Yeah.
And so,
wow,
that was in 2004.
Was that, I'm hazy with my dates, is that when Red Oak was in Greensboro, or were they in Witsit then?
We were still in Greensboro. We opened up in 1990 in Greensboro. I started in March of 2004 and ran the brew pub for almost just over 2 years while we were planning the new brewery. And for the last 4 months, I was spending my mornings in Greensboro and then the afternoons here overseeing the project being put together.
What was that transition like, going from a little brew pub? Because that was off of, it's like Guilford, right?
Guilford College and Friendly.
So that's a smaller area. What was the transition to go to a larger area for that?
Well, what Bill had done there in Greensboro was amazing. For the amount of square feet that we were utilizing, we were doing close to 10,000 barrels of beer. We couldn't squeeze another drop out, but we went from a 10 hectoliter system to a 50 hectoliter system.
Yeah.
So 5 times the volume doesn't mean multiply all your ingredients by 5. There's a whole lot more finesse that goes into it, tweaking the recipe over time until you arrive at what you want. But surprisingly, nobody ever noticed the change of beer from brew pub to brewery.
Okay.
And I purposely didn't tell our sales crew that, hey, this is the first batch out of the new brewery. They were already pulling everything out of the same cooler at the time. And we never got any comments about, well, this must be the new batch, or so somehow we did it.
That's awesome.
Smooth transition, and we've been growing ever since.
Okay. I had sent this because this next question was more orchestrated, because at the front of the lager house there's a Thomas Jefferson quote, and I was interested in if there was any specific core values that Red Oak has that differentiate it from other breweries, whether it be other craft breweries or the big corporations.
Well, yeah, that quote has to do with honesty.
Yeah.
And it's all about honesty, discipline, and determination. Those are the 3 big ones here at Red Oak, because we believe those are 3 character traits that we can't teach you. You've got to come in the door with those already as being a part of you. That's what we look for. We're a small company, and everyone wears lots of hats. We just try and hire really good people.
Yeah. Okay. Is there does that translate at all into manufacturing the beer itself? Because I guess what I was interested in was, is there a connection between the Bavarian history of how you brew it and how you guys orchestrate the moral guidelines that people come in with?
That's a really interesting question. Yeah, I would say the whole process that we do is very simplified. I like to say that we're brewing beer just like it was done in 1516, however, with microchips. I mean, it is an automated brewery. What I mean by that is that it's just those 4 ingredients. We're not adding any enzymes to speed things up, any chemical preservatives, no flavorings added or anything like that. Not that there's anything wrong with creativity, but a lot of people don't realize that sometimes the simple things are the hardest to pull off.
Yeah.
And in a brewery environment, you should always judge that brewery by their lightest beer.
Okay.
The beer that gets the least amount of respect out there among beer geeks, but the lightest beer is the hardest one to pull off.
Okay.
Because it is unforgiving. Any flaw, whether it's in your technique or in the raw materials, is immediately recognizable. The bolder and stronger the beer is, the more forgiving it is. So Reinheitsgebot is what we do here. That's the German purity law.
Okay.
It's simple. It's bare bones, and maybe that's our corporate approach too to making beer. We don't have fancy labels and crazy names for the beers. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not.
Where does the Red Oak name come into? Because there is an oaky taste to it. So I guess my question is, are there like acorns and oaks thrown into the beer?
I wish I had a cool story for that. I get that question all the time. We have people with nut allergies emailing us, making sure there are no nuts in the beer. It's a great name. I think originally Bill wanted to name it Oak Ridge Amber because he lives in Oak Ridge. His trademark attorney came back with the bad news that Oak Ridge was already registered to a wine company, so he couldn't use it.
Wow.
And I'd like to think it was probably a late night of drinking, and somebody threw Red Oak out there, and it stuck. But as far as I know, there's really there's a Red Oak, North Carolina. We have a friend that lives out in that direction. But no, it's just a good name. But a lot of people come through the brewery on the tour, see all the stainless steel, and ask, where's the wood? That flavor comes from the malt, but it's psychology too. Sure, that oaky flavor, I think, it's probably part of the name.
Okay, so you're thinking, so it's more so that I am expecting an oak taste, and it's not even there. Oh my God. Some
of the malt would carry some of that oaky, woody flavor.
Wow.
But that's not an ice cold Red Oak, but if you let it get around 55, 60, I do pick up some of that oaky flavor myself.
I feel like I've been lied to my entire life here. That's awesome. Because then the next question is, are there actual hummingbirds thrown in there?
Well, we had somebody following one of our trucks in the middle of summer and called the number that was on the back of the truck saying, please tell me there are no birds in the back of that truck. It's 92 degrees out here today.
That's so funny. Going into the traditions that you talked about, and we talked about this briefly as we were setting up. How do you guys maintain your grounded traditions in the world of flashy and trendy? Because, college kids are doing, the seltzers, they're wanting ciders, they're wanting all these, what some beer geeks would go, this is just a bastardization of what's going on. So how do you stay grounded in what you guys are doing and not feel like you have to compete with that?
Well, we've got one beer, the Red Oak Amber Lager, that's gotten us this far. And it's proof that it works, that you don't have to be flashy or, the latest trend in beer. So we're just going to continue that path. It's a slower path to success. You don't get from 0 barrels to 400,000 in 10 years doing it the way we do. But I think that more cautious approach is also a big ace up our sleeve when it comes to quality as well.
Okay. Well, I thought you touched on it earlier too. I think the idea of simplicity being so hard that when you can accomplish it, it's like reaping so many benefits. So instead of throwing in all these, other things, you guys can stay true to consistent patterns.
Right.
That's awesome. Okay. This was a question. This was out of my own ignorance because I enjoy beer, and I wanted to ask an actual brewmaster. Could you explain to the audience and to me specifically, what is the differentiating factor that creates stouts, lagers, and ales? And like I said, this is probably the most stupid question, but I'm sick and tired of hearing it from some bros that are at the bar like, oh, this is a stout. So could you explain to me what the difference is?
Yeah, sure. Well, a stout would be a member of the ale family.
Okay.
It's an example of an ale, and what determines it is the yeast that you were using. We have ale yeast and lager yeast, and among those two, there are many different strains that have different characteristics as far as production times, temperatures, and then, of course, flavor as well. And with an ale, you're going to ferment it warm, And those warmer temperatures lead to a very rapid process. And you can make a delicious ale in less than 10 days. Many of the bigger ale producers are doing it in 3 days from start to finish. Lager, you could ferment at an ale temperature, and it would be a very rapid process, and it would be done 3 to 10 days. However, at warm temperatures, the lager yeast will produce some very foul flavors, whereas the ale yeast produces very clean flavor, or very fruity, what we perceive as being delicious flavors. So you have to ferment a lager cold, which slows the whole production down.
Okay.
Rather than 3 to 10 days, we're anywhere between 4 and 8 weeks for our beers, and then some of the seasonal see 12 weeks plus before they're complete. Not to get too scientific, but one is a top fermenting yeast, that's the ale, and then the bottom fermenting yeast is the lager. During the reproduction phase of fermentation, the ale yeast forms chains. The daughter cells do not separate from the mother cells, so under the microscope you would have a chain of up to 7, 8 cells connected, and the carbon dioxide, the bubbles produced during CO2, attach to those chains and lift them to the top, physically, literally lifting the yeast to the top of the vessel.
Wow.
That's top fermenting yeast. Lager yeast, actually, are single cells, so the mother and daughter cells separate during reproduction, and those singular cells are just floating around the tank. The bubbles can't really attach and lift them to the top, so gravity takes over and pulls them to the bottom of the tank.
Okay. Wow. So, yeah. You don't really think about the scientific background of your beer, let alone food in general. So is that what you go through in school? You're going through all of the breakdowns?
Absolutely.
Wow. And that, like you said, you take that. It takes like 4 years to do that?
Yes.
How does that get like brain busting at some point, or does it just become natural to you? You're just like, this is it? It was easy for me to learn because it was applied science. You know, a lot of times you sat in school and you thought, why am I learning, this biology, but in this case it was applied directly to beer, and it was a lot easier to log in the hours and learn. I feel like high school would have been different if they taught us with beer. Obviously don't do that, but that's very, very interesting. Kind of going off of that, because this is kind of where I wanted to lead you to. Obviously with the pandemic going on, you guys haven't been doing a lot of brewery tours. And like you said at the beginning, that is one of your favorite things to do. So if you could, I was going to ask if you could summarize the start to finish process of how Red Oak goes from the beginning to tap. Well, it starts with the raw materials, and we import all the malt from Weyermann Malts in Bamberg, Germany. They've been producing malt since 1874. They're my favorite malting company. The malt is really the soul of beer, and especially in craft brewing, hops seems to bask in all the glory. It's a very important ingredient, but without malt, it doesn't become an alcoholic beverage. That's the source of fermentable sugar, and so the malt that we import from Bavaria, that gives it the authentic flavor. From there, we will mill the malt, crush it, and that grist is then transferred into our mash kettle. That's the first vessel in our brew house. If you're driving down the road, it'd be the one on the west end of the building. And the mash kettle, the malt and the water mixed together, it's roughly a 3-hour process of converting starch into fermentable sugar. That's the whole purpose of mashing. Once we have that, we have to separate the grain from the liquid. The grain becomes cattle feed. A lot of it does go out to Bill Sherrill's farm out in Oak Ridge. He still raises cattle, and the spent grain is a very healthy feed for them. Makes some of the best beef that you can find. And then the liquid then will transfer to our kettle, and at that point we no longer call it mash. We begin to call it wort. So in our wort kettle, it boils for 90 minutes. That's when the hops are added. Hops are the spice of beer. They're going to give your beer either bitterness or aromatic flavor depending on the timing. We add hops at the beginning of the boil, twice during the boil, and then once when the boil is over. That would be the aromatic addition, because if you boil it, those aromatic oils are driven out with the steam. So you want to keep, in order to keep those oils in the finished beer, you want to add them right before you're going to chill the batch down. That's the last thing that happens in the brew house. So we go from milling, mashing, lautering, which is the step of separating that grain from the liquid, boiling, and then cooling. Then it ends up in our fermentation cellar. The lager yeast is added, and becomes the hardest worker in the brewery then for the next 4 weeks, where it's
first rather quickly converting that sugar into alcohol, carbon dioxide, and CO2, and then towards the end, very slowly. That's another characteristic of lager yeast, that you have a very slow secondary fermentation. Allows us to capture the CO2, and we naturally carbonate all of our beer, which sets us apart from over 90, probably 95% of the beer out there today. Natural carbonation is, of course, the traditional technique before we had gases in cylinders that you could purchase and force into a liquid. Before that, you had the natural CO2 that the yeast is producing. And then, one of the other processes that we forego is filtration. Filtration's been around well over 100 years now. When I graduated from brewing school, I was brainwashed to think that filtration was one of the most important aspects of the brewing process, and that clarity and the stability that filtration gives, it dramatically increases your shelf life, allows you to pasteurize as well, which we don't do. By not doing that, we leave the beer in its wholesome, nutritious state. We're not heating it up to destroy vitamins and enzymes. We're not removing any of that. It goes straight out with the beer.
Wow.
So that's in a nutshell. And then packaging, of course, everybody's least favorite part of the process. If you ever meet a brewmaster that tells you they love bottling or canning, they're lying or they're crazy. But yeah, the packaging is our bottleneck. Trying to get enough package on the shelf. Due to the pandemic, of course, the business has shifted to off-premise sales, and we've had to pivot pretty quickly to adjust to that new reality.
Wow. So I got two things here. Then it seems there's not a single part of the beer in the beer process that's waste. Really, like it's very minimal waste. It seems
minimal. Yes, we've got systems in place to recoup rinse water and use it as the next rinse water on a cycle, and brings our water usage down to 3 to 4 gallons of water to a gallon of beer, which is about as low as you can get. There's still some breweries out there that are in the 8 to 10 range gallons of water to make a gallon of beer. So we've invested a lot up front for those long-term savings, and of course it has a huge environmental impact as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then the second thing, kind of going in there, I remember you saying this on, you were talking about the vitamins and minerals. I remember you saying this as one of my favorite parts, was the idea that beer was healthier or better for you to have as far as cleanliness than if you were to go like a third world country or something, than the water. And to me, I was like, holy cow, so I'll just have a beer when I go to another country. So it's, I guess, could you explain that? I think I'm butchering it here.
No, I mean, that's true. During the Great Plague, one of the things was that water was definitely not safe to consume. And in Belgium and in Bavaria, where there were lots of monastery breweries, the monks were brewers of the day, and they would give out a daily ration even to the peasants of beer in order to keep them hydrated and healthy, because they didn't understand exactly what was going on, the science behind it, but they did know that when you drank beer, you did not get sick. Being a fermented food, which is essentially what it is, it's safe. The pH range, the alcohol, everything about it inhibits the growth of human pathogens. Now, there are beer spoilage bacteria. That's what sour beer is all about. But human pathogens don't survive.
Wow.
So it is the safer. They say that it saved humanity in Central Europe during the plague was beer, because wine, also same thing, but that was more the upper class that was into the wine drinking, or the southern regions of Europe. So yeah,
I thought that was a very interesting thing to bring up, because it was especially with what's going on right now. Everyone is thinking about cleanliness, and then looking at the history of beer being one of the cleanest things that you could have had outside of, who knows what you could have had. You could have bread. I mean, which is that's what's crazy. And
beer is liquid bread.
What's that adage you say? I don't know if you're supposed to say it, but is it? It's one beer is better than, or two beers is better than one beer.
Oh, yeah, that's a quote from Professor Dr. Pindl from the Bayern Stefan Technical University in Munich. And his quote, and I haven't said it in so long, I hope I get it right, it's 1 beer a day is better than no beer a day. Mm-hmm. 2 beers a day are better than 1. However, 4 beers are not twice as good as 2 beers a day. So it's that old adage of, you got to keep it in moderation.
Yeah. Okay. Kind of moving on into, I guess we're talking about the realm of what you're going through. Are there any misconceptions that you get a lot about whether it be Red Oak breweries or beer in general that you yourself would like to just put to rest?
Yes. The one is that the biggest misconception is that when you drive down the highway and you look at our brewery, you think that we're a very big brewery. But it goes back to being a lager brewery. We have to have at 4 times the capacity of an ale brewery in order to make the same amount of beer. Mm-hmm. So to put things in perspective, right now, we could make about 50,000 barrels of lager a year. We could do 200,000 barrels of ale and not spend any more money on tanks. We already have those tanks, but instead of being able to turn them every 3 to 10 days, we might only see 8 to 10 turns a year per tank. So that's a misconception that we're very big. A lot of these specialty bars that we can't get into because they like to have real special beers on tap. Mm-hmm. And I always counter that with, well, that's why I'm here talking to you. This is a unfiltered, unpasteurized, naturally carbonated lager. There's not anything out there that's anything like it. You would have a very unique beer on tap if you put it on. So that's another misconception. They think that Red Oak is just a mass-produced beer that is not worthy of that respect that some of these other beers that are made in 3 days seem to get out there.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. When I come here, I'll hear somebody go, "Do you guys have a cider? Do you guys have something?" I literally heard one time, "Do you guys have like a Michelob Ultra?" I was like, "Where do you think you are?"
That we don't have, but we do have a good wine selection. We do have some cider now, I think, as well, because we did get enough requests.
Wow.
We had a hard time finding. We wanted it to be more of a craft cider, something flavorful. But yeah, I mean, if all we had was beer here, we'd have a lot of people not wanting to walk in the door. Right? Yeah. Unfortunately, you got to go with that. But seltzer, I would definitely put my foot down on that.
Okay. I did want to ask this, or I guess I wanted to tell you this, and then I wanted your rebuttal to it. Whenever I tell people what my favorite beer is, I tell them it's Red Oak. I tell you specifically, I love Redbird, the combination of Hummingbird and Red Oak. I don't know if that's a bastardization of the beers, but I love it. It's a great taste. But when I tell people that, some of my beer connoisseur friends who just happen to just have a blog, they're no professional at all, they tell me Red Oak is it's too sweet. So what would your reaction to that be?
Well, I mean, it's true to style. It's what we're going for. A Bavarian lager is not supposed to be bitter, and it's not even. It is a malty beer by design.
Yeah.
So I think it's because it's become such a rare beer style that when people taste it, they think, "Wow, this is too sweet for beer," because there aren't many other examples left. Malty beers have left the marketplace over the last 40, 50 years. Even in Germany, a lot of the breweries stopped producing those malt bombs because of the limited shelf life. And in today's marketplace, it's all about stability and shelf life if you're looking to ship long distances. And so those malty beers are very rare. And it's, of course, consumers today, when they try it, they think, wow, this is too sweet.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing to compare it to.
Wow. So they just need to expound their horizon there.
It's like, a lot of the beer rating sites. I'm never offended if somebody tells me that a Helles is their favorite beer style, but they don't like Hummingbird. Well, because at least they're comparing it to Helles. But when someone says, I don't like Helles and I don't like Hummingbird, well, then you shouldn't have been rating it because you didn't like it in the first place. So,
Okay. Which is there a rating that you've had that they just complete, other than Helles, like the scenario you just had? Have there been other ratings where you're just like, what the hell are you talking about?
Well, I mean, the best one that I remembered was somebody said that a hummingbird tasted like hot dog water. So I'm not sure why they're drinking hot dog water, but
their hot dog water's pretty good then.
Yeah.
We're going to be straight with you.
Exactly. Yeah. I drink it too.
Oh, my goodness. What is your favorite on tap here?
Oh, well, my favorite would have to be Red Oak. I mean, that's the one of the rotating seasonals, and we do 6 of them right now. The Black Oak Double Bock is the current one. It would be the Old Oak, which is our Oktoberfest beer.
Okay,
it's usually out between August and September. That would be my favorite of the seasonal beers.
Mm-hmm.
That, for every mood, for every meal, there's a beer. So it's not like I'm drinking Red Oak every day. Some days I feel like having a hummingbird, and very rarely would it be a Redbird, but I've been known to do that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I don't think there's a beer on tap you guys have that I don't like. I'm not trying to sound like a stan over here, but like I remember the Battlefield is really good. I've had it with ice cream. Makes a great float.
And that goes way back when we did that during the tours. Is that what you're remembering?
I don't remember them serving it. I just remember being heard. I tried it, and it was like, all right, let's go.
I used to have a freezer in my office with ice cream, and when Battlefield was out, we would, if anybody wanted to try it, we'd put a scoop in your glass after the tour.
Okay. Yeah. I was going to say, I'm pretty sure you guys invented that. Is there any other combinations with your beer that grow great? Like maybe Hummingbird does taste good with a hot dog. I mean, you guys have a hot dog stand here.
It does. I think we get a lot of requests from restaurants for beer and food pairings. Mm-hmm. And some beers are very extreme, so they probably need a certain dish. Mm-hmm. So maybe an imperial stout would be better with roast pork, or a double IPA with a very spicy jalapeno-laden taco, because they're just both so bold. Mm-hmm. But my answer is usually, I think especially Red Oak goes well with everything. Mm-hmm. The only food it doesn't really go well with, in my opinion, and we all perceive flavors differently, is garlic. And I love garlic, but it makes after you've had, like, say, some garlic bread, and then you take a sip of Red Oak, it really tastes like Band-Aids. It's just not a good combination.
Okay.
But other than that, I think the beers go well with a wide variety of foods.
Okay. Awesome.
And you can cook with beer too. It's more versatile in the kitchen than wine is.
What can be cooked with it?
Chili, any kinds of stews. It's good just even for marinating. Mm-hmm. And especially the darker beers, the Battlefield and the Black Oak really even break down the meat a little bit if you let it marinate overnight. Very, very good for that.
Do you guys have like a specific beer can chicken recipe that you guys use?
Well, the Worst House is pretty simple, just brats. We wanted to keep it simple there. Mm-hmm. However, when we had the brew pub running, we had the drunken chicken. Of course, that was marinated in the beer. Mm-hmm. And what else did we have over there? We had the potato box soup. I actually have some neighbors that I recently met, and they when they found out I worked for Red Oak, they wanted not to know what the Red Oak recipe was, but whether or not I had the potato box soup recipe.
Oh, wow.
And so, that was the Battlefield in a potato soup. It was really good. And I wish I had the recipe because I do like to cook myself. But I'd have to ask Bill whether or not he's got it in his archives somewhere.
So what are we talked about obviously with the art studio, not the art studio, but the museum that's coming. Are there any other future prospects for Red Oak's sake, or the beer garden, or the village itself? Like, where do you guys head from here?
Well, we're hoping that once the pandemic's over, we can actually utilize the space appropriately. Mm-hmm. And we had 3 big festivals planned for 2020 that, of course, were all canceled. So we're hoping to get back to that. The art gallery, I'm not sure exactly when the opening date is, but that's going to be the next big celebration. Mm-hmm. is having that open and running. On the brewery side, we still have some room. I can add 12 more tanks, and then we're full without trying to figure out whether or not we want to locate some outdoor tanks, which would be the next logical approach since we really can't put any more buildings up. Mm-hmm. And then our packaging. We need to add some more machinery into our packaging operation and make it more efficient. So those are the two big projects that we're floating right now between the art gallery and packaging.
Okay. And kind of stemming from there, I just recently, as of today, found out it doesn't exist anymore. You guys had the free beer campaign. Obviously, I feel like that was a huge success. I don't know if it ended up being a success, but as far as name recognition, I just would get off the interstate. Oh, free beer! Oh, it's the thing.
And I still have my T-shirt, and every time I wear it, people are like, well, did you bring it? Did you? But it was a play on the Free Tibet movement essentially, and North Carolina breweries being unable to self-distribute what they wanted to, and so the free beer movement was something so memorable that you're still talking about it, and it led to passing a bill in Raleigh that did allow us to produce 50,000 barrels a year and self-distribute it, so that doubled it. And they also added on that all the sales of a brewery's tap room are not counted towards that 50,000. So everything we sell through the lager house is in addition to the 50,000. Oh wow! So the free beer movement is on hold right now until maybe we bump up against 50,000 and then we have to go back to the drawing board again.
Okay.
But
so look forward to that sign on I-40 again.
That's right.
Well, Chris, this was an absolute pleasure. Like I said, this has always been on my list to have you on the podcast, someone from Red Oak on the podcast. So this was awesome. Did I miss anything? Do you have anything to add? No, just maybe the history, how we started actually in 1979 as Franklin's Off Friendly. Bill Sherrill started it, and it was a fine dining restaurant. The wine cellar had over $1 million inventory of fine wine in there. And then he saw towards the end of the 80s where fine dining was going out of style and casual dining was taking over. People weren't dressing up as much anymore to go out and eat, and he decided to shut down, renovate, and reopen as a brew pub. And where the piano bar was, that's where the brew house stood. And of course, before that, he did take a cross-country trip to across mainly the Pacific Northwest, because back in the late 80s, that's really the only areas that had some craft breweries to look at. And one thing he saw was that they were all doing English-style ales. And so when he came back, he decided on doing it differently, doing lagers. And the main reason for this is that he did grow up in Germany, and he lived in Switzerland as well, and both lager-heavy countries. I just wanted to get some more of that history into the. Is there? I'm trying to think how to phrase this. Is there a? I just had it and lost it. But it's very interesting that you guys had that adaptation from what people were going. Is there this kind of a play on what we were going with? What's going next? Are you guys adapting that same culture into what's going on now? Because obviously we talked about at the beginning, like college kids aren't doing this. Like, what is the adaptation strategy, or are you guys just focusing in on your niche?
We're just focusing in our niche.
Okay.
I think we're just wait for them to come to us once they discover it. I think a lot of it is just discovery. Yeah. Somebody trying it for the first time, and we've had a lot of converts over the years, but they've usually been Bud Light and Coors Light converts. So I guess our goal now is seltzer converts, people that grew up in drinking that, or their first alcoholic beverage was a seltzer, and now we need to convert them to a Hummingbird.
You need a new campaign. That's what you need. You need a we'll be your first.
Right.
That'd be sick. You'll be your first, and then they taste it, and then every other beer tastes like trash because this is their first incorporation of what a real beer tastes like.
Exactly.
We figured it out. Well, Chris, like I said, this was an absolute pleasure to have you on.
It's been a pleasure being on, Tyler. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So, guys, if you haven't already and you do not know where Red Oak is, what is the address?
6905 Conica Drive would be the Lager House address. Open Wednesday through Sunday, Wednesday through Friday from 4 to 10 p.m., although with the restrictions now, last call is before 9. And then Saturday we open at noon, close at 10, and then Sunday from noon to 7 o'clock. We also have a Brew-Thru. I wanted to plug that real quick, where you don't even have to get out of your car. You pull up. Jake is there to take care of you, all your needs, whether it's cans or bottles, and he'll load it up for you, and you're on your way down the road.
That's awesome. So other than that, you guys can check them out on Facebook. It's on the you just look up Red Oak Brewery. You can hit them up on Instagram at Red Oak Brew, and then as well at Red Oak Lagerhouse, and on their website, www.redoakbrewery.com. Once again, Chris, thank you so much.
Thanks, Tyler.
Guys, if you enjoyed this podcast, please share with a friend. Subscribe and rate the podcast on Apple. Follow us on Spotify. And if you haven't already, follow our Instagram at Cooler Conversations. This podcast is the culmination of cool stories and the coolest people. This is Cooler Conversations. Later.